Mike from Safeguard Solutions. Thank you so much for coming. I invited you on because I really want to hear more about what you do in your business. Roughly, as I understand it, you go into people's homes, identify the sources of EMF, and I guess teach them, sell them how to make it better. I'm not sure. I want to throw it right over to you, Mike. How did you get into this? How long have you been in this? And what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very nice to meet you. I've been in this now for about 4 or 5 years. And I started off with doing a few courses with building biology and working with a local supplier of electromagnetic field measurement meters and shielding supplies. So I got a really deep background on how to properly shield against the different areas of EMF, right? Whether it be RF, which is the wireless radiation, or magnetic fields or electric fields. And then I actually got a lot deeper into it. And I find that the deeper I got into it, the more I wanted to know. So it definitely really is a rabbit hole to go down. And there's a lot of information out there. But all my training is with the Building Biology Institute. So that's my number one source.
Building biology is a cool word. I just wrote that down. So this is like the energy of buildings.
It's the health and wellness of buildings, right? So we go into homes, we go into commercial buildings, offices, and we measure the amount of EMFs. We also do air quality and mold testing as well. So it's the health and wellness of the building as a whole, and we identify the areas where there's danger, and we work to get those areas brought back down to much healthier levels.
Very cool. I didn't know you did mold as well.
Yeah. We actually just branched out into that not too long ago. So that side of it is still kind of new to us, but it's definitely, mold is an area nowadays where it needs to be very closely paid attention to. A lot of people have mold and they don't even know it, right? So I get a lot of calls from clients that are having breathing issues, or their kids are always sick, or they're having skin issues. Those are the most common complaints, right? Well, what we do is we go in and we test the air. So we test the air for formaldehyde, we test the air for particulates, we test the air for VOCs, radon, and then again, while we're doing that, we do all the mold inspection as well. So we're checking the attic for the mold, we're checking areas under the sinks in the bathrooms, stuff like that, because those are all breathing issues. See, all of that stuff, the mold, you can sometimes visually see it. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just airborne. The electromagnetic fields and air quality, these are all invisible things that can only be detected with meters, right? So that's what we specialize in. We do complete scans of the homes from top to bottom. We figure out what's going on, and then we work to remediate.
That's very cool. Honestly, I'm learning about your business at the same time here. And part of the reason is you operate in Ontario, Canada. Most of our listeners, they're scattered all over the world, but a lot of them are from Ontario. I'm from Ontario. And I'd like someone to recommend. This is even better than I thought, because it would be very annoying to hire one group of people to come in and do your EMF scanning and solutions, and another one to come in for mold and air quality and stuff. So you guys are kind of like a one-stop shop for cleaning up your house.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. And I mean, as well, our company, like I do a lot of pre-sale home inspections as well. So I work with a lot of realtors. So with clients, when they are looking to buy homes or sell homes, or a lot of people call us for like power line readings. If they're looking to buy a home, they want to know, is it safe? There's power lines nearby. So we go in and we do all those measurements. Same thing with cell towers as well, right? How close is it? What are the levels like? So we do all of that.
This is so important too, especially before you buy the house. The last thing you want to do is buy a house and then realize you can't sleep in it, or realize you're getting sick in it or something, and you can't figure out why.
That's exactly what ends up happening, right? People don't know. They don't want to spend the money to do the investigation ahead of time. But it's coming around. We're seeing a big uptick in knowledge and what people actually are willing to do to protect their families, right? Which is great, because I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, that's something that, like, myself as the owner of the company, we really pride ourselves on making sure that we take care of the families that want and need the help.
Yeah, this wasn't on most people's radar even just a handful of years ago. I'm very, very happy to see this becoming a big thing because we were talking before we hit record there, and I was saying that, yeah, I can hardly even be in a city or a suburb. I don't even want to visit. It drives me nuts. Not everyone's that sensitive, but I feel like I've
Yep.
become a lot more sensitive over the years, and that it's increased over the recent years just dramatically, dramatically. You know, I grew
Yeah.
up, I'm not that old here, but I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, before everyone had a cell phone in their hand,
Oh
before
yeah.
smartphones came out. And yeah, the difference is just so big to me in so many different ways, including the sociological ways and how we act, but definitely in cranking up the EMF everywhere, these small cell towers everywhere. My mom just moved. She moved out of Pickering, Ontario. She moved out further into the country in Lindsay, Ontario. I couldn't sleep at my mom's house for years. Just I
Yeah.
knew I would go there and I would just be getting the most horrible sleeps. I wake up and felt like I didn't sleep at all. And I knew that's what it was. It was the only explanation. Nothing else really changed. And all she did was move and bam, I could finally sleep there. It's so, so nice.
Yeah. It's yeah, it that is often one of the most common complaints that we get, right? And like, I mean, we'll dive into one thing at a time here, but you wouldn't even believe the things that I find. And just through like my building biology training and stuff like that, I've kind of uh, come up with ideas and solutions to a lot of these problems. And I have actually products that I've designed as well that actually really make a big difference in terms of helping get rid of those EMFs that are in the bedroom, right? Because building biology, it's really, really, really strongly focused on the bedrooms because that's where our bodies go to heal and rest and recover, right? And without proper rest and proper cover, especially as we start to age, right, it really impacts the body. And you hear about a lot. If you ask 9 out of 10 people, or if you ask 10 people, how was your sleep last night? Probably 7 out of 10 of them, if they're being honest, are going to tell you it was terrible, right? And that's simply because the environments that our homes are in, right, um, contain a lot of smart devices, electronics, right? Even something as simple as having lamps, alarm clocks, heaters plugged in beside the beds, right? These are all things that really deeply impact the way that our bodies shut down, right? Because our bodies they're like natural conductors, right? So our bodies are made up of frequencies and we conduct all of those electric fields, right? So that's when you start to hear a lot about the earthing and the grounding and stuff like that, right? And um, it's really, really important to pay attention to this stuff, especially in the bedrooms.
Yeah, you just started off. That's a good way to kick off this rabbit hole here. So I had on my list of questions here, what do you think the biggest sources are in the homes? But I'd like to preface that by saying proximity is your enemy. The closer you are to these devices, the worse it is for you.
Yeah,
So even if you have a major source such as a refrigerator or freezer when the compressor's running, and I'll get your opinion on those major
yeah,
appliances, you don't
yeah.
sleep beside your fridge,
No, you
right?
don't.
But you can
Yeah.
sleep beside a little digital alarm clock and not think anything of it. People don't think, oh, it's a small little device. What could it possibly be doing? So what's up? How do you see these things comparing? What are the worst devices? What are the
Yeah.
worst sources in the home?
So the number one worst source, right? I'll jump right to the top is the modem, right? The modem in our homes, and I can tell you like at least 6 out of 10 homes that I go into, especially smaller homes, whether they're condos or bachelor apartments, um, they have the modems close by to the bedrooms, right? And I mean, a lot of people put them in their offices, right? But these things are pumping out like up to 2 million microwatts per meter squared. And I mean, the target by building biology standards is about 100, right? And people don't know any different, right?
So you
But
said it's 2 million microwatts.
that's what I'm seeing. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. So like through testing, I'm getting testing up to 2 million microwatts, and it's pretty standard that to see those kind of levels off of these modems, right? And I actually design I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, Ryan, but I've actually designed a modem cover that goes over top of the modem that shields the radiation that comes off these modems, but also allows the Wi-Fi still, right? So in my home, I have one in the basement, and I cover my modem with it, and we still work from home upstairs, and the reception is still there for the Wi-Fi, but it blocks the radiation. I have all the videos and everything like that uploaded on my Instagram to show, and I'm actually in the middle of adding it onto my website too. But the modem is the number one thing that I find in all homes to be the biggest problem.
It's very interesting. Let me say too, so you know a little bit that I'm in the health business, I'm in the nutrition business. I've been trying to speak more and more on EMF because everyone comes to us about nutrients, and nutrition is extremely important, don't get me wrong, but I try and bring this to people's attention that I've been doing this business almost 10 years now. When I first started, the people who trained me used to tell me this business used to be easier. It used to be easier to help people. And that was before, the handheld internet and stuff was completely ubiquitous. This is 10 years ago. Over the last 10 years, I've seen an increase in cases that are tough or impossible to crack. I don't want to say anything's impossible, but we haven't been able to crack the code. People who, the recovery is just so much slower than I'm used to, because I think back 8-7 years ago, not everyone had a modem in their house. We deal with a lot of older people on disability and social security and stuff. It wasn't a necessity for them to have a Wi-Fi router, and so they didn't. But now it feels like you have to have this, and all these businesses you have to have a smartphone. Some businesses, it's hard to even deal with them if you don't have their app downloaded and stuff like that.
Exactly. Think about it this way. Down here in Ontario, Rogers and Bell are the two biggest communication companies, right? So right now, you cannot get TV and internet and telephone without having one of their modems. You can't call them up and be like, I want TV only, right? Because what's happening is now they don't have the cable. Remember, way back in the day, they used to just have a like TV cable connection, right? And it was nowadays everything is run through the internet. So if your internet goes down, you lose everything, which is why I don't know if you remember a couple years back when Rogers had that big thing happen here in Toronto, where their main system shut down and people lost everything. They couldn't communicate. Their cell phones were down. Our cell phones were down. Our TVs were down. Our home phones were down. Everything was down. We couldn't make a phone call. We couldn't connect. We couldn't communicate with the real world. And then Rogers came back out and said, we are making changes to that to make sure this never happens again. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't, everybody has to have one of these boxes in their home.
It wasn't even just communication, Mike. Businesses couldn't take payments. ATMs didn't work.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yep, that's right. Yep. Yeah.
Can't get your money. You can't pay for your gas. Wow. It was a big deal in Ontario.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
And I'm just going to throw this in there. Every opportunity I get, I encourage people to cancel their phone bill anyway. I think these are a cartel. Basically, it's extortion. And back when I was a kid, you could pay $20 and have a phone, right? And nobody pays $20 anymore. And as you said, good luck even just getting one thing from them. You got to buy the whole bundle.
Yeah, exactly. If you try and reduce your bill and get one of them removed, they've packaged it so that it's not even worth it. Like I tried to get rid of my home phone because we have cell phones and reduce the bills, but they won't let us do that because they've packaged it so that you have to. There's no reduction in just taking that off. So
the modem is the number one source in the house.
It is. Yep.
Good news is you can shield that. I want to get a little bit more information on that, but you can also turn it off. You were talking about how important 100%. The bedroom is.
Yep. And that's what a lot of people are doing too, right? Is at nighttime they shut down the modem, and that is one of the shielding. That's actually one of the remediation strategies that we work with clients, is how to do that, right? So at nighttime, some people, but it's a major inconvenience to do that as well, right? To have to shut down the modem at nighttime and restart it again in the morning and wait for it to start up again, right? So I mean, yeah, it's one of those things, but some people are okay with doing that, and some people they don't bother, and that's one of the things.
Well, I completely agree with you that if there is any time and place to focus on, it's the bedroom and the nighttime, because you're right, it's your healing time, and
Mhm.
if it's easy to clear out your bedroom and all this stuff, and yeah, this is 8 hours. This is like a third of your life that you're spending in your
Yep.
bedroom. So that's, one third of the problem that you could instantly mediate. You can instantly turn that down. And I know it's inconvenient when I'm at my house in Canada. I talk to my wife on the phone at night. I just said I don't pay a phone bill, so I do that through the internet. So yeah, I would have to
Mhm.
go downstairs and unplug it. And I have a housemate, and maybe he's still watching, the TV, which also runs on the internet. It is inconvenient. It is, but we can work it out so that it turns off. You could even put a timer on it, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. Actually, one of my really good clients, they put theirs on a timer, and at nighttime it shuts down. Yep, you can absolutely do that.
So your modem cover, if you don't mind, I'd really love people to kind of get an idea what they're in for price wise if they're going to
Yeah,
implement some
no,
of the
no,
things
no,
we talk
absolutely,
about. So what does a modem
absolutely.
cover run for? Like on the
So the
regular
modem,
market and
yeah.
yours.
So on the regular market, I mean, it's very similar probably to what mine is. I price mine out at about $100 to $110, depending on the size of the modem, because there are some different size modems, right? Bell is about double the size, so I charge an extra $10 for the Bell modems. But for the Rogers Ignite modems, they're nice and small and compact, so those ones go for $100. And the one difference, more or less, that I find that you got to be really careful of is the materials that these covers are made out of, right? Simply because of the fact that you can buy something on Amazon for $30, right? But what kind of shielding materials are they using, and where do these materials come from, right? So the material that I'm using, it's rated at 120 dB right now. The average shielding effectiveness of a lot of shielding materials is between like 32 and 40 dB
What's
right now.
DB?
dB is actually the unit of measurement that they use for shielding effectiveness,
Okay.
right? So when they do shielding testing, right, they do it in labs where it's like a Faraday room, right? So there's no other signals in the room that are present except for the one that they're trying to generate. So they'll generate a 10 gigahertz signal, right? For example, and they'll use the shielding materials to basically see how well that material is blocking the radiation that's coming off of that frequency, right? So the higher up the higher the frequency, sometimes you see the shielding effectiveness drop off a little bit. So some with testing, you'll see at 1 gigahertz this shields at 120 dB. At 10 gigahertz, this shields at 110 dB, for example, right? So these professional laboratories are the ones that are measuring that. Yeah,
That's cool though. I didn't know that we could look out for that. So if you see the
yeah,
cheapest one
100%.
on Amazon, it'll
Yeah,
say, will it say the rating on it?
sometimes they don't even put it in the listing, right? Sometimes what I've noticed is that they'll say, "Please email us or contact us for further information regarding details of this product." So they won't even tell you,
So you'd call
right?
that a red flag?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah. Because like 90% of this stuff that comes in online is generated from materials that are made from China, right? That are
Oh
made.
yeah, I believe you.
Yeah, and,
That's
and you know
terrible.
what? That's not to say that the materials they're using are poor or bad, right? Because I'm sure there are some good ones, right? But the one thing that I could tell you about the materials that I use, I source the best, and this stuff works really, really well at shielding against the modem.
Cool. I'm very interested. I think I'm going to get one from you myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I want to hear more about what you guys do before I get into my questions. So you've already said the router is usually the worst thing in the house. What's second and third and fourth, and what do you do about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So after the router, the next biggest thing is, I would say, this is still dealing with RF wireless stuff, right? Um, I would say there's a bigger um, problem right now with the amount of devices that we're using in our homes that are using wireless technology, right? I mean, I'm talking things like things you probably wouldn't even know, right? Like our doorbells, right? The new Ring doorbells, right? And then on top of that, you have the speaker that has to be plugged in so you can actually hear the doorbell ring, right? That works off of Wi-Fi as well. And then you have the thermostats, and then you have the TVs, right? All the TVs now, you can't walk into a Best Buy or a TV dealer and buy a TV that's not a smart TV anymore, right? And then you're looking at even things like your printers, right? Your printers, your computers, your laptops, they all work off of Wi-Fi. And I mean, with a lot of these things, and a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually go into the settings and turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, right? I've walked into clients' homes and they have Wi-Fi on their refrigerators, on their stoves, on their washers and dryers, right? And you wouldn't even believe it. I actually saw the other day just a regular air purifier. I was picking up major amounts of RF. And then the client said to me, "Oh yeah, I control that with my phone." And I just looked at him and I was like, "Okay, I don't think that is really needed." And I showed him the amount of radiation coming off of it, right? So it's all these little things that are all throughout the entire home, and they really impact the overall, what we call like a total measurement, right? And so that would be, I would say, kind of as a group, the second biggest thing there that really is impacting a lot of the EMFs in our homes.
But those are all things we invite in. Those are not like
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
wiring in your house. I thought you were going to get to the wiring and the outlets and fridge and
Oh yes. So that's what we call like low frequency issues, right? And that's a whole total different bulk, right? So like if you want to talk a little bit about wiring, a lot of times people are stuck with the wiring that they have because of the fact that it's existing in the walls, right? Unless you're building a custom home from scratch and you can put in what they call like a BX cable, which is like a shielded cable, right? Which blocks the electric fields, because the electric fields that run through the walls, so they do bleed off, and that's going into like dirty electricity territory and frequencies. And I'm not sure if you want to get into that later, but that's a whole different ballgame, right? But yeah, we run into situations too. We get a lot of calls where people have panel boxes in bedrooms, in basements where they're building a bedroom. They want to know that it's safe. Their husbands have been sleeping down there, and they don't feel well, right? So we go in and we do testing for that, and we have shielding materials that basically block the magnetic fields that come off of these panels. Or sometimes you get clients who have panels on the opposite side of the wall of the bedroom, right? Um, I've run into situations where I have somebody has their office on one side of the wall, so their computers are all there, and then on the other side of the wall is the children's room where the kid sleeps, right? So what's happening is all these electric fields that are coming off all these computer devices are going right through the wall, and the child's right there on the other side, right? So these are all the things that we kind of take a look at when we're doing our inspections.
wow. So back up to a minute on these devices. I had read somewhere that the new smart TVs, or the flat screen TVs in general, before they were smart, that flat screen TVs were better than the old tube TVs, and that's why they used to tell you don't sit in front of the TV. But you're absolutely right. You've got this new dynamic where the TV it's giving off basically Wi-Fi signal, and then all these other things in our houses My house is pretty clean, all this stuff. I'm pretty aware of this. I don't have a toaster anyways, but if I did, I wouldn't
Yeah,
want it with any sort of smartness. And by the way, smart to me is mostly like a surveillance tool. It doesn't mean it's intelligent. It means that it can communicate with other devices, right? Like this is
that's
with
right. Yeah,
these smart
yeah,
meters.
that's right.
Your
Yeah,
smart
that's
meter
correct.
can't play you in chess, but it can relay your information to another device. That's what makes it smart.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's what goes straight to the utility company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'd like you to talk about them as well, but I'd like to hammer in that, yeah, a lot of us just aren't aware enough. And I get this too in conversations with people. They say, okay, I've just woken up to this. What do I do? And I say, okay, find everything that has a Bluetooth function and throw it away. And they say, but I just spent all this money on it. Okay, well, we've all made bad decisions in life. I'm sorry to be the one who tells you. I'm not here
Yeah,
to sell you something, right? If you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
get better,
yeah,
if
of
you want to clean up
course.
your environment, I've been saying this for a long time. Your
Yeah,
first two things are distance and shielding. And sometimes you have to throw these things away. Why do you want a smart toaster? Go buy a regular toaster for $20.
yeah, yeah,
These things
absolutely.
cost more too for no reason. As you said, why do you
It's
need
yeah,
to control your air purifier from your phone or your garage door opener? Like just close your garage. Use your
yeah,
brain.
yeah,
Right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And like I mean, the thing is, I always tell clients that like we don't necessarily have to live back in the caveman days, right? In order to be safe, right? We just want to kind of be mindful of how we do things, right? And there's a ton of solutions on how to do things properly. I've gone into hardwiring Ethernet cables with clients, and I've gone into, instead of having your bed up against a wall where there's a receptacle there, maybe we can pull it back because what happens is a lot of times too, people have their bedrooms set up the wrong way, right? And what I mean by that is that um, if you have your headboard right up against an electrical outlet, right, you get a lot of electric fields that bleed off of that outlet, right? And by either there's a couple things you can do in that case. You can move the direction of the bed, right? Or move it away from the outlet. Or the other thing you could also do too is you could move the bed out 3 feet from the wall if your room is big enough, right? Simply because of the fact what happens is with electric fields, they don't travel far distances, right? So every foot after 3 feet, it just drops off, and it drops off drastically, right? So there's big changes there too, right? So that's where distance and proximity comes in with electric fields. However, it doesn't quite work the same way with radio frequency or wireless radiation because wireless radiation is very reflective, right? Which means that it bounces off wall. You can't see this stuff, but it bounces off walls, it reflects it. So if you have something coming from the living room, it very easily passes up through the walls into the third floor where your bedrooms are, right? Same thing. So I mean, honestly, in that case, it's not really proximity with wireless radiation. It's actually elimination of the source itself.
Well, they're meant to travel distance, right? You can stand
They are
outside your house and use your Wi-Fi.
100%. Yep. Yep.
People park in
100%.
front of our house and use our Wi-Fi. Everyone knows our password. So you're talking about hardwiring. I love
Yep.
hardwiring, but
Yep.
I've been very disappointed with the market. So, for example, they sell these Ethernet adapters for your cell phone because I
Yeah.
operate everything on the internet. I run a business on the internet. I don't need a phone number. I use a text app. It gives me a free phone number, so I don't pay the telecom cartels. I have a cable internet company that I pay for my small town. It's not one of the giants, but I bought two Ethernet adapters now, and both of them broke quickly. One lasted
Mm.
6 months. The other one lasted like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I actually I set up a lot of what we call Netgear power line boxes in customers' homes. And with the Netgear power line boxes, you need the Ethernet hardwire cables with the adapters that go to the phones and laptops. Right. The thing is that you have to find a quality connector for your laptop and phones after that basically connect to the Ethernet. And I think what's happening is a lot. I actually had a customer very recently last week. I set everything up for her. She ordered the piece off of Amazon, and she's complaining about the quality of the signal, and I have a really good feeling that it's because of the connector piece that she purchased, right? Because I mean, you can buy these things for you can buy these adapters for maybe $25, right, on Amazon.
I bought the more expensive one, hoping it would be better. That's the one that
Did
only
you?
lasted 2 weeks.
Oh dear. Yeah. So I'd be returning that to Amazon and trying something else. Yeah, until it works. Because I can tell you, like I use mine um for connecting my office computer upstairs. And I have it plugged into the modem downstairs. So basically, for those of us that are not familiar with how Netgear powerline boxes work, basically what it does is it uses the frequencies that are running through your home. So the standard frequency is 60 hertz running through the wiring inside the walls. So you have one box that plugs into the modem downstairs, and then you have one box that plugs in upstairs where your computer is. And these use Ethernet cables, and the box is plugged directly into the receptacle outlets in the wall. It's very effective, I find, for me. I haven't had any issues with it at all. But I have had some feedback from clients about the adapter pieces, right? So the Netgear boxes themselves, I mean, you can get those on Best Buy for about $140. The adapters, you can get them on Amazon for about $25. The one that I can tell you that I have purchased that I had really good success with was actually the one from Best Buy. I paid about $40 for it, but it worked really well.
Ethernet. I'm taking notes here because I need to get back on this too, and I didn't want to buy a new one until I talked to someone. And the problem is no one knows anything anymore. You go into these stores, they don't make commissions, they don't even care. They're playing games on their phone. They're getting paid hourly. It doesn't matter whether you buy anything or not. And I'm like, man, I need some real advice here on which of these is. I'm not buying a third one and then having it break. I need to upgrade the quality here, and nobody seems to be able to tell me the quality. So
yeah, by breaking, what exactly do you mean? Like it just becomes ineffective?
Just stop working. Yeah, just stop working.
Yeah.
So you you install the Netgear boxes, which is like am I correct? This is like a row of plugs. You can plug in all these different Ethernet cables, and you can hook one up to your computer, and one up to your phone, one up to your laptop, one up to your TV.
So I haven't actually gotten to the point where I'm kind of installing more than one, right, in a home. I actually did plan to reach out to Netgear to find out if that was possible, because it's actually a very interesting way of doing things, right? But like I said, when I'm doing the initial setup, right, it's usually I've been working with people to help set up their offices, right? So a lot of people right now are running everything off Wi-Fi. So basically what we do is we hook up the Netgear platform, and again, it's one box into the receptacle closest to the modem. Then there's an Ethernet cable that plugs in from there to the modem. And then the second Netgear box, they're just little white boxes, right? The second one plugs in beside your computer in your office into the closest receptacle, and then you have a hardwired Ethernet cable that plugs into that little white box that's plugged into the receptacle, and the other end of that goes into your computer. And it just transfers the signal from the modem through the electrical wiring in the walls, and then transfers that signal to the other white box. The two white boxes talk or communicate, and that internet signal then gets passed through to your computer. So you basically can turn off your Wi-Fi in your office, so you don't have to be exposed to the Wi-Fi all day long while you work.
Yeah, I love that. Both of my computers don't have internet unless you plug them in, or you have to plug in one of those little USB Wi-Fi signal catchers or whatever. So if it doesn't have that, there's no internet. So I have to plug it in. And I obviously prefer that, of course. I'd like to get completely off of Wi-Fi. I'd like to throw the router out. That's why I'm asking this, because I saw these devices, these banks of Ethernet cable plug-in things. But I got I was reading reviews and stuff, and it's like the more you plug in, some of them, if it's giving you this amount of power, 100%, you put another plug in, now they're 50-50, so they're not distributing it equally and all this stuff. And I would like to know more about that, where I could plug everything in. And everything doesn't mean much, by the way. Like at my home, for example, we have the TV that runs on the internet. We have the computer that runs on the internet, and that'll probably be 2 computers soon. And then we have 2 phones. So it's 4
Yeah,
devices.
that's
So
right. Yep.
could
Yep.
I
So
theoretically do that from the wall where the internet cable comes in the first place before we
yeah.
plug it into the
So
router?
these boxes, they have a dual connection, right? So you have two Ethernet cables that you can run from that, right? So it's great for when you are sitting in the living room watching, I guess, videos on your phone, and your son or daughter or another family member is sitting beside you on the couch too. And instead of you, I mean, we all do it, right? With the Wi-Fi, you watching YouTube videos or Netflix or whatever, right? Um, Even if you're just on your laptop working, right? You just pick up the cable, plug it into your laptop, and it'll stream the internet connection there for you, right? And you just turn off the Wi-Fi on your computer, and it should work beautifully.
The problem I'm at right now in my house is that I am plugging, like my computer, for example. Computer's not giving off a Wi-Fi signal, but I have the cable plugged into the router because I can't just do it from the wall because I only have one
Yeah,
plug. This is recent. I'm trying to figure out how to do this because now the one plug that comes out of the wall, I plug it into the router, and then I have to plug in either my Ethernet adapter for my phone or the computer to the router, but I still have the router on. So it's kind of stupid to me, but it does reduce it in my hand. And I don't want to hold a
that's right.
Wi-Fi
Yeah,
router, which is what my phone is.
100%.
And I
Yep.
don't want to
Yep.
sit
That's
beside
correct.
a computer that's,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
going out
Well,
looking for the Wi-Fi.
that's where the RadTech modem covers come in, right? That's those the modem covers. I'm telling you, they are extremely effective at shielding the radiation that's coming off those
So they
modems.
shield it, but it still works on Wi-Fi. How does that make sense?
Wi-Fi, it doesn't block, so it blocks the frequency, but the Wi-Fi signal doesn't get cut, right?
Isn't the signal
So
a frequency itself?
when a modem is giving off frequencies, right, for our cell phones, laptops, everything to kind of work, right? It picks up that signal and then it turns it into an internet signal, right? So remember binary code 01000111. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like that, right? So what happens though is those frequencies bleed off radiation. That's the harmful effect, right? So what happens is the materials that we're using in the boxes are actually shielding materials made to shield radiation, right? So it doesn't block the signal or the frequency, but it blocks the radiation that bleeds off of those frequencies, right? So to make it simple to actually kind of try and understand is, let's say, for example, you have with the modem, it's giving a signal of, say, 5.3 gigahertz. So off that signal of 5.3 gigahertz comes radiation. That radiation is actually being shielded and blocked by and reduced by the shielding materials that are in the box, right? But it's not blocking the frequency, right? Because believe me when I say this, I've been selling these now for, I guess, maybe about a year and a half, and I've had no complaints from clients, right? And I always tell clients that if you're working, say you're working at home and the modem is downstairs in the basement, if there is a lag, just take the box off for a few minutes while you're doing your work and then put it back on after. Because it does sometimes you get a little bit of a lag, right? But that's kind of expected as well, right? But I can tell you, like my wife works on the main floor of our house in the modems in the basement. I get no complaints from her. So I would be the first one to hear about it while she's working at home 8 hours a day.
So the material that our houses are made of, mostly wood, maybe a few steel beams for some of us,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do nothing to reduce the EMF.
They do. Yeah, like I've been in some basements where you get absolutely zero reception, right? And I've been in some. Usually, it's concrete. I think that there's a lot of problem there, concrete and steel. But I mean, it depends. I get perfect reception all throughout my house. It just in that sense, building materials. It also depends on the frequencies, right? Because like the way that it works is 5G frequencies operate on very, very, very short waves. So the shorter the wave, the higher the degree of it can't pass through things as well, right? So it's actually interfered with by even things like clouds, rain, trees, buildings, people, right? Whereas with like older frequencies, where with like 4G, 3G, even LTE, right? They operate off of longer waves. So those longer waves are actually, they're a lot stronger, right? They pass through things much easier, right? So they pass through the walls of our homes a lot easier. They travel much farther distances, right? Which is why, like, really, if you think back 20, 30 years, you've never seen cell towers anywhere, right? Because of the fact that they were far in the distance in open fields, kind of like power lines, right? And you didn't actually see these cell towers. But that's what they kind of, one of the biggest things that they've taught us in building biology, is that what the real danger with 5G is that it's so close to home. They have to make it that way because it wouldn't work. The networks won't work without it, because there's too much. They use the higher the frequency, and in the US, I know they're running up between 20 to 40 gigahertz. Here in Canada, we're still much lower than that. I think we're running like 5 to 10 gigahertz at the most down here, and I don't know how much longer that's going to be for. But what's happening is they're starting to see, and you probably see them all the time in your area, is these small cell antennas, right, that are on the street lights and the poles and much closer to home, because they need this infrastructure every 100 feet or so to be able to broadcast that signal and to keep the signal moving. Otherwise, it gets blocked out by all the rows of homes and everything like that, and that all of a sudden the network's not working as effectively.
So why do they pitch 5G as so much better? Is it because it's more data? Like
Yeah,
the frequencies
exactly.
are shorter, so they can send more data through the.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quicker, faster speeds, and yeah, it is a lot faster,
So
right?
it's basically so people can watch Netflix on their phone.
Yeah, more or less, right? And I mean, you get it in a lot of like, say, downtown areas, right? Where you have not just you have a lot of people, right? In those downtown areas that are uploading, downloading, watching Netflix, doing all these things, right? In stadiums, right? 5G is big in those kind of areas, right? But I mean, 5G, in my opinion, doesn't belong in residential areas, right? It's just not needed.
I would
Like,
argue that cell phone data in general is not needed and doesn't belong in our world. I mean, well, let me throw an analogy out here. It's one that was used in a book I really like, The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Firstenberg. A lot of people are using that as their like standard reference for the problem or for waking people up to it. And it's probably
yeah,
my favorite EMF book right now. At
yep,
the end of the book, he said, if someone walked into your house with a lit cigarette, you would tell them to get out, right? You're not allowed to smoke in stadiums. Why is it allowed to blast me with frequencies against my permission, right? We all live in these. I live in a suburb here, but even up north, I live in a town. You know, if our neighbor was just having a huge smoke fire, everyone would come out and be like, man, what are you doing? Stop it, right? Because the smoke's getting into my house and all this stuff. But
yeah.
we can't see the waves, as you mentioned in that book, the invisible rainbow. You can't see this. So is this some part of the reason why it's allowed? I don't think it should be allowed. I don't think you need to upload Instagram pictures on the go. I haven't paid a phone bill in many years. If I want to take a picture outside, I will take a picture outside and I will upload it later. You know, this whole thing about instant gratification, and this is a little bit of a social rant here, but it's kind of gross to me how the average person can't go 5 seconds, 30 seconds without some sort of artificial stimulation. So people can't wait in line at Walmart or at the grocery store. You know, I've got 20 seconds to wait for the next person's done. I'm going to pull up my phone and do something on it. Like I think we've lost control. I think this is a sign of an addiction, and it's harming us. And people say, "Oh, I need my phone," and I say, "I run an internet business. I don't need to pay a phone bill. I do not need data while I'm out. You know, read a book at the airport or something like this." I think it's crazy that they allow this everywhere and encourage it everywhere. And I'm throwing the mic back to you. But if you didn't know, a lot of American cities, you enter the city and you're given a citywide Wi-Fi option, like Xfinity, like Denver. I was just in Colorado and Boulder, and you can do Wi-Fi anywhere. You don't even have to have a phone plan. You just pay them whatever the money is. But I'm saying the whole city is stocked with Wi-Fi now. So no matter where you are in the city, you can't escape this. You have no choice but to accept this bombardment from every angle with this invisible rainbow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. And you know what? I think we're all guilty of it, right? It's become such a convenience, and just like you said, standing in line waiting at a grocery store, nobody has patience anymore. You look at people on a bus, right? Everybody's got their phones out, right? And it's become so much more than just about taking pictures. And I remember when, I guess we're going back about 20 years, but I remember when the first phone came out and they were advertising, it was Bell. And they were advertising that you can now watch live channels on TV on your phone. And since then, it's turned into so much more than that. It's Netflix, it's Disney, it's all these apps are streaming apps are everywhere. And they take your favorite TV shows off a regular cable TV and they put it on Netflix or Disney so that you're so much geared towards buying that package just to watch that one show. And it's turned into a game pretty much just all about money. But it's a lot more now than just taking a picture with your camera on your phones.
And I'd like to get back to the home and what you guys do, but I think this is part of it. You told me, and this surprised me actually. I genuinely thought you were going to talk about fridges and air conditioners and stuff. But you said the second worst thing is the stuff we bring in that was sold to us on convenience, which how convenient really is it to control your air purifier from your phone or your thermostat? Just turn the thermostat to 72 or whatever it is. What would you do? Most people keep it at the same temperature all the time anyways. But this wasn't a problem. They're selling us these things based on things that weren't a problem before. It wasn't a problem that you couldn't watch HBO while you drive before. That wasn't a problem, right? We made this into a convenience thing, but it didn't solve a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the reason that I say that is the number two thing is because you run into particular custom situations where, remember what I was saying about electric fields, right? They don't travel far distances, right? So you run into what I call like particular situations, right? Which are avoidable in most cases, right? Where you have the air conditioning unit next to a bed, right? Or you run into a situation like I was saying where you have an office on one side of the wall and the other side of the wall is the bedroom for the child, right? It doesn't have to be a child, it could be an adult too, but those are all particular situations that are kind of customizable with how we set up our homes, right? Depending on whether it's an apartment, a condo, a small home, big home, right? All these things change how our homes are set up on the inside. And that's why I honestly think that, like, when you talk about refrigerators and microwaves and stoves, yeah, they give off high levels of electric fields and magnetic fields, but unless they're connected somewhere into areas of like the building of the bedrooms, it still takes a backseat to like this wireless radiation.
And for the amount of time you're standing in front of the stove, it's probably nowhere near the amount of time that you're sitting in a room.
Yep. And then it comes down to the different kind of stoves that you have too, right? You have I think they're called inductive stoves. I can't remember the exact terminology, but there's a couple different kinds of stoves that actually have much higher levels of magnetic fields when you're using them than the average conventional stove. And but again, that's exactly like what you just said. Is it comes down to really about the amount of time that you are standing in front of it and working with it, and even still the fact, like I said, like it's just magnetic electric fields, they drop off after 3 feet, right? So it's where you're sitting in your living room, you're probably not sitting directly right beside your stove. And then look at two, like your microwave, it gives off magnetic fields and electric fields and radio frequency wireless radiation as well, but it gives off different amounts when it's turned on versus when it's just idle, right? And like a lot of people, I mean, if you have the ability to plug in your microwave and unplug it when you're not using it, that's a great idea, right? Because when it's not plugged in, you're not being exposed to those electric fields, right? So that's another thing too, is that's why I always tell people, when you're in your bedrooms and you are using things like lamps, alarm clocks, forget about putting them on your bedside table, right? Try and find a spot for it on a dresser that's 5 feet away from the bed, right? Because again, those electric fields, they do not travel more than 3 feet, right? And you can take all these videos are actually available on my Instagram. I've done videos showing demonstrations of all of these things. And that stuff, keeping it away from the bedside, is one of the first things they teach us in building biology, right? Because it comes down to body voltage. Our body attracts and collects these electric fields that are bleeding off of these things that are plugged into electricity. And body voltage, it impacts our body. And when we have excess amounts of body voltage, it causes a lot of problems and a lot of illnesses, sicknesses. Our bodies can't shut down properly. That's going more into the whole low frequency issue with how our bodies shut down to go to sleep at night, and grounding and earthing and how they all kind of interconnect. But yeah, that's all stuff for the bedroom, more or less. But
Can you talk about that? Let me preface it too. So
yeah.
I told you off camera here that I hate where we are in Houston. We're in the suburbs outside of Houston, but still, when we first came here, we were in an apartment that we didn't know had a secret cell phone tower across the street, hidden one.
Mm.
So we moved. It's the extreme step. We moved because I went nuts there. I already have a whole bunch of EMF devices and stuff, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't keep a phone in my pocket and all that stuff, but I could not sleep in that place. And I'm even starting to take like melatonin and other sleep aids, which I never need. Most of the time, I was insomniac for 25 years, by the way. That's part of how I got into this business. I had all kinds of health problems and they were fixed with proper nutrition. So I know that insomnia is usually a nutrient deficiency, and I sleep fine otherwise. But I came here, just couldn't sleep no matter what the nutrition was. If anything, my nutrition is better here because my wife keeps a good eye on me, and we don't have any sugar, any nothing, no extras, eat super clean, all this stuff. Could not sleep here. Moved into this place. It's better. It's probably about half as bad, but it's still, I have very, very poor sleeps here. We got a grounding mat recently. This is my actual question. We got a grounding mat for the bed, and I did find a huge difference. I'm still not sleeping perfectly, but I'm sleeping a lot better. So what do you mean when you're talking about low frequency, and how does that have to do with grounding?
Yeah. So low frequency is magnetic and electric fields, right? So we're talking about, instead of being in the spectrum, right, the electromagnetic field spectrum, we have frequencies that basically operate on kilohertz, megahertz, gigahertz, right? So a lot of the low frequency issues that we're talking about, like with magnetic and electric fields, and these are things like wiring in the walls, right? Or these are things like having our things that are plugged into the outlets around our bed, right? Or even the panel boxes, right? Which basically all the wiring runs throughout your entire home for your circuits, right? These are all areas where you have high levels of electric and magnetic fields. So that all kind of stems back to how our bodies conduct and hold onto and store those electric fields in our body. And again, it's the earthing grounding side of it is actually the release of these electric fields, right? So, but I'll tell you something. Another really good strategy of redirecting electric fields is with a EMF paint, right? So my daughter's room, we painted all the walls and the ceiling with an EMF paint, and this is actually what my company specializes in, is shielding strategies, right? So we identify the problems and then we come up with the solutions on how to properly fix these scenarios. So for grounding, right, this paint is conductive, right? So what basically happens is that all these electric fields that are floating throughout the room from all the electronic devices that we use, okay, are attracted to this EMF paint instead of our bodies, right? So if I were to try and read the electric fields in an ungrounded room versus a room that is grounded with EMF paint, it's night and day. So for example, like with the paint, what they do is they basically use a conductive tape that goes all around the wall. Okay. Almost follows the perimeter throughout the bedroom. And that conductive tape comes back to one point where they use what they call like a grounding plate. Okay. And that grounding plate is attached to the EMF paint and the tape. And then you run a copper cable from that grounding plate to a grounding source. That could be many different things, right? That could be a copper pipe. A lot of electricians use the ground screw on the receptacle outlets, right? But we never tell clients how to properly ground because we want them to use licensed electricians for that, right? Because there is definitely a safety hazard there. So, but for us, that room is grounded. So we see a lot of the electric fields much, much lower, right, than in an ungrounded room.
You're kind of blowing
So
my mind. I've got to stop you so we could explain this. You have to explain
yeah,
it to me because I never heard this before. So grounding to me, I thought you had to be connected to the ground, and it makes sense to me to have a cable or something, or a grounding mat or something where it runs from cable, and yeah, you plug it into either the wall outlet ground, or you can run it outside through a wire buried in the ground. That's physically
that's right.
grounded. So, but you're
It's the
saying
same thing.
you just took the ground out of grounding though, and that's what kind of blew my mind. So you're saying that you can paint the room with this EMF paint, which attracts the electrostatic electricity to it, and I guess funnels it towards this tape, which runs around the perimeter, which runs down into one certain spot where you've got a grounding plate, and then that is itself grounded. So instead of the ground being grounded, you've turned the whole room into a static collector, and
well,
then
you're
run it through the ground.
Basically you're using so like these grounding mats and everything like that, they're still plugged into some sort of an area where you are releasing those electric fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're some people do the grounding outside where they run a ground rod into the ground. So I've seen people do that. It's the same thing when you're doing it with the EMF paint, right? Because what typically happens is there's like all homes are grounded with typically 2 to 8 foot grounding rods that run deep into the earth, right? So by using that receptacle outlet, there's a ground connected to every receptacle outlet. It's the same type of earthing solution in that way, but you'll never find that there is a truer ground than the actual earth outside, right? There's many different constituents that we can go into with that. Like some people think that the receptacles in our homes may not be there is a such thing as a dirty ground, right? And that can cause a lot of problems as well with earthing, right? Even still outside, I've heard rumors from other building biologists now that we're running into problems where you get people who are trying to earth outside and they run into problems called ground current. And this is a big thing right now in Alberta.
Cables under the ground?
Exactly.
Like in suburbs that don't have
that
the
overhead
poles?
wiring.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you, there's no true good solution to that because I actually think that underground buried cables are better than overheads. And here's why. So underground buried cables stay underground, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the average person, how many people, if you were to ask them out of 10, would say that they know about grounding and earthing and how to do it properly? Now, if you go into a area of homes where they have above ground electrical wiring, where does that wire attach to? It attaches to the side of the house, right? And then it comes down into your electrical in-service, right? Which goes down to your panel box and then gets distributed throughout the home through the circuits, which are the breakers, right? That wire, when it attaches to the side of your home, what's usually there on the other side of that wall? It's usually bedrooms.
Okay.
Right?
Didn't know.
So the just take a look when next time you're walking through a neighborhood and and it has overhead wiring, right? So what is the major problem with this is the magnetic fields that are bleeding off of these power lines are going right through the walls of these bedrooms, right? So that's another big issue, right? And I get a lot of calls from clients that are their children's bedrooms are on the other side of these walls where they sleep, and they want to make sure that it's safe. So we go in and we do the measurements. We take the measurements for the magnetic fields, and yeah, it really is something that has made me come to the conclusion that I think underground power lines are much better than overhead right now.
Geez, I gotta check my house here. Okay,
Yeah,
I have a question about the EMF paint. I have a few questions. Does it have to be a
yeah, absolutely.
specific brand?
No, there's a couple. Pretty much the main one out there is by a company called Y Shield. They are from Germany. There's a couple of local suppliers, but actually as well, people can your followers can also come directly through me, and we can also set up a discount for them as well, for these products. But the paint is it basically pilots out of Germany, and it was made and manufactured there, and it that is probably one of the better ones, right? However, there's a couple different ones, but they all pretty much do the exact same thing.
I had read that the paint wasn't as good of a shield as like pure metal, like tin sheets, or and
Yeah.
I just like your opinion on this. I don't know,
Yeah,
or
no, absolutely.
foil.
Yep. There's a couple. It all comes down to, remember we were talking about like the DB rating, the shielding effectiveness, right? And the
Mhm.
testing that we're getting, right? So the way that paint works is pretty much every layer that you put on adds an extra layer of shielding, right? So with one layer, for example, with the Y Shield HSF 54, you get 39 dB, right? With two layers, you get 49 dB. With three layers, you get 59 dB, right? The thing is, there's other that 59 dB is phenomenal. It's really good stuff, right? And I saw a major reduction in my daughter's room when we did the paint there, because like we have a cell tower right probably about 100 feet away
Oh my
from
goodness.
our home, and you can visually see it almost right in your like face. You don't have to look hard to see it, and it's actually the town water tower, and it's just covered in antennas. And so we did that, and I did all the work myself, and that was kind of the beginning of how people are shielding from exterior sources. And I still think it's probably one of the better ways, right? But there are other ways to do it too, and it just really depends on the stage of how your home is set up too, right? Because like if you think about it, if you are in a situation where you're building a home from scratch, or you're re-drywalling or doing major renovations, right? We get a lot of clients that'll say, "Hey, Mike, you know what? We're doing renovations, and we're tearing down the drywall and rebuilding, and we want to shield for EMFs. How can we properly do this?" So at that point, right, instead of using EMF paint, what I would do is I would use an RF foil, right? Or there's different fabrics you can use, right, that go on the studs that are very highly effective at shielding against outside sources for wireless radiation, right? And actually, the same material that I use for my boxes is an RF foil, right? 120 dB. That goes a long way, and you can see it in the videos that I have for the modem covers. You can see the reduction with when you put the box on, right? And that's the same material you use on the studs, and it's just ultra effective at blocking wireless radiation.
You said the paint had this electrostatic capturing ability. Does
Yeah, it
any
does. Yeah,
foil
yeah,
or metal plates, like tin plates, lead plates, do they have
yep.
that same
So
effect?
it's so no, not necessarily. So like these lead plates or metal or brick or concrete, anything like that, it depends on how conductive the material is, right? So pretty much when you put the paint on the wall, the black paint itself, it's actually like a graphite based paint, right? So one of the main ingredients is like a graphite, right? But they market it as being very, very low VOCs and very safe, right? But typically, if we take a step back for a second and just try and understand how this whole thing becomes conductive, right? It's actually the materials that they're using to make the paint is conductive itself, right? So by conductive, that's the part of it that is actually drawing in the electric fields, right? The strips of tape is just to redirect those electric field buildups to the copper cable, which is connected to the plate. And that copper cable is then connected to a grounding source. And that's how all of that stuff gets neutralized, right? And typically, you probably pretty much only need 1 to 2 of these grounding plates in each room, depending on also on what the electrician recommends at the time too, right? But I mean, for us, ours, we only ended up using 1 grounding plate. So that's kind of how the grounding side of the paint works.
If you were to so you said it's black, right? Can you just paint it once, like say you do 1, 2, 3 layers, and then you
Yep.
just paint a regular paint color over it?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, typically what happens is so the manufacturer states right in their technical data sheets that it must be painted over with a like you can just use your average Benjamin Moore paint to go over top of it. But I'm being honest, it's solid black paint, right? So it is actually probably better to use a primer paint over top of the black, right? So you put on your 2 to 3 coats of black paint first, wait for it to dry, and then you go over top of it with a latex based paint. That latex based paint, it could be a primer, right? And then you can go over top of it with any color you want after that.
Okay. Tell me if you think I'm silly for doing this, but I was very broke not that long ago, a few years ago. And when I moved into my house, I had a problem with certain sources like the smart meter, which we're still haggling with the company to take off years later. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Smart meters behind where I sit on my chair and do my reading. I sit there most of the day. So I decided to put multiple layers of foil behind it on the wall and put bookshelves in front of it. And I don't feel it. I haven't run a meter on it, but I
No.
don't feel it. And I also did,
This is the smart meter. The smart meter.
yeah. So
Yeah.
do you think multiple layers of aluminum foil is good enough?
So here's the thing about aluminum foil, right? So a lot of people use it, and it does have attenuation, right? The same way that brick, concrete, metals all have steel, they all have attenuation, right? Otherwise, you would never hear about people using tinfoil for this purpose, right? The thing is that it's not tested in a lab. Nobody's going to take a piece of tinfoil to a lab to test it to see what the attenuation is on it, right? Or to see the shielding effectiveness of it. So we don't know how well it shields, right? So like if you were to compare, like I was saying, like an EMF paint to the RF foil is rated at 120 dB. The EMF paint is rated at like standard 1 layer to 1 layer, right? The EMF paint is rated at 39, so 120 to 39, right? So what's the shielding effectiveness on the aluminum? Is it 10? Is it 15? Is it 30? We don't know, right? Because it's unless the tinfoil company comes out and says our tinfoil has shielding effectiveness of 35 dB,
Mm-hmm.
we're taking a guess, right? We're guessing at what works, but it
You
must
also
have something
mentioned,
there because a lot of people use it.
yeah, I mean, just from my own like internal meter, which I know is not that sensitive. I gotta buy a new meter. That's one of my questions for you. We had one
Yeah,
down in the
which
store, and
one
I
do you
never
have?
bought one. No, we have one at the store that I helped to open, and that's where I learned about a lot of this stuff. And so I just kept that in mind. Okay, I knew I already played around with it. I walked around everything, and I saw okay, basically
Hmm.
everything gives off a field, and I just want to stay away from everything. I'm pretty extreme on it, and I just don't want to be around devices as much as possible. It's ironic that I work on the phone and the computer, but I'm aiming my life to completely getting off of all devices. I will exit the internet gracefully or not to get myself away from all this. But you mentioned the office thing as well with the bedroom. So my office is on the other side of my bedroom at my house in Canada. And so I did the same thing. I took multiple layers of foil and then I put fabric over top of that, just so
You got
it doesn't look unsightly.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So a couple things there, right? So that may help with wireless radiation, right? Also known as RF, radio frequency, right? High frequency. But a lot of keep this in mind too, that a lot of the major problem there is that the electric fields, right, that come off the electrical equipment bleeding through the walls. The tinfoil itself, unless you connect it with a copper cable and ground it, right, it's not going to do anything for electric fields, right? So in that case, there's also EMF paint that is specialized in electric field grounding. So instead of it, like the standard HSF 54 Y-shield paint is good for high frequency RF radiation as well as low frequency electric fields, right? And the electric fields are neutralized when you ground it. Tinfoil would be good for blocking RF radiation, but you're still going to have the electric fields coming through, right?
Because it's not capturing the static.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's not blocking it either.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well,
so I mean, it would come down to at that point, really, like I'd have to look into like how conductive is tinfoil, right? Like if tinfoil is conductive, that's going to attract a lot of the electric fields. That could be good and that could be bad, but at the end of the day, like let's say for example, you put the tinfoil up on the wall and it's highly conductive, right? All those electric fields are going to sit on that tinfoil. If you don't have that grounded, it's just going to sit on the tinfoil, right? And that could be bad if it's right beside. It's going to actually increase your electric fields if you're sleeping right beside it, right?
You know, I doubt my. Okay, I live in a mining town, Kirkland Lake, Ontario. The houses are rough. They're rugged. They're wooden shacks. They're cabins. And most of them were built. I know my house was built in the 1930s, and then it was retrofitted in the 50s. I don't think it was built with a bathroom to begin with. I think it was an outhouse in the back. I don't think it was meant to hold electricity, so I think it was retrofitted later. So I guess I could buy. Should I buy one of those things that the electricians have, where they can stick it into the ground, like the ground in the outlet, and see if it's actually grounded? Because I doubt my house is properly grounded.
Yeah, that's it. In order for the outlet to be used as a ground, it has to be grounded. That's the first thing we check when we're doing our inspections of the homes before we even make any recommendations for grounding or earthing or anything like that. We check all receptacles in the home to make sure that they're grounded and wired properly, right? Because a lot of times we find this all the time, where it's not a grounding issue, but it's actually a wiring error, right? So we have things like if you were to pull out a receptacle from the wall and look at it, it has 3 screws, right? You have a hot, a neutral, and a ground, right? Sometimes they reverse them, right? So sometimes you get do-it-yourself homeowners that wire up their receptacles or replace their receptacles and they place the wire on the wrong one, right? The power still works, so everything must be good, right? Well, what happens is that if you have a reverse polarity of the neutral and the ground, or the hot and the neutral, it causes a high magnetic field, right? So that's one of the other things that we're checking for as well when we're going through homes is magnetic field. So I'll walk around the room with my Gauss meter and look at the magnetic and magnetic fields. And if those magnetic fields are high, then I know there's probably a problem there.
A couple questions here when it comes to these meters. First of all, what type of tool do you use to check the ground?
It's a meter that basically you just plug right in. It's not a meter. It just looks like a little screwdriver almost. You plug it directly and it has 3 prongs on it, right? And then it has the LED lights that'll tell you if A, the wiring is correct, B, it's grounded, C, if there's an error. Right.
And that's just a cheap little device, right? You don't need a special
one. Yeah, they're not very expensive at all. Yeah,
like $20.
About $20 is perfect.
But then you said a Gauss meter, so that's not measuring
Yeah, so
EMF.
that's actually so Gauss meters. Let's talk about this for 1 sec. So there's different kinds of meters that we use, right? So the average homeowner who is interested in measuring electromagnetic fields in their home will use more of what we call like an all-in-one meter. Okay, so it measures all three areas at EMF, right? So it measures RF wireless. The second option is it measures magnetic fields. The third option is it measures electric fields, right? But for somebody like me, in building biology, we use specific meters for the different areas of EMF, right? So we have four main areas that we work with, right? So we have RF wireless radiation. So we have meters for that, depending on the frequency. I actually have two very high powered meters, right? One that measures up to 3.3 gigahertz, and then I have another one that measures up to 10 gigahertz, right? And those are all, we only use the state of the art equipment with gigahertz solutions. So we're not using your average all in one meter that costs a couple $100 on Amazon. Our meters are actually about 24 to $2,700 each meter.
Ooh.
It's the sensitivity, the accuracy, everything changes at that point, right? We're using very specialized antennas, and we have data logging equipment, so we're data logging in a lot of homes and stuff like that as well. So it's a totally different ball game than your average all-in-one meter.
Got you. Couple questions on that. So, and let me just throw both questions at you. You can answer. If you've got one meter that can go to the 10 gigahertz range, why would you use a smaller one? Is it just because it's more sensitive at the
Yeah.
smaller ranges? That's
No,
question number one.
and it can be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Question number two, data logging. So this means it's keeping a record as you're going around, and it's keeping track of like where you are in the house and stuff like that too, rather than just you walk around with the meter and 1 second it's at 100 and the next second it's at 70, and you kind of just got to look at it and get your bearings that way.
So when it comes down to it, it's actually the frequency that it's operating on, right? So like, for example, unless you have a specific device that knows, like there's different frequencies that different devices are operating on. So that's why we use, if I'm trying to measure RF, I'm using both of my RF meters, right? Because radiation levels could be different, right? So for example, like you might have a cordless telephone that operates on 5.8 gigahertz, right? If I'm using an EMF meter that only measures up to 3.3 gigahertz, I'm not going to pick up that signal at 5.8.
It's just going to max out. Yeah.
It won't even pick up the signal. It won't,
Okay.
It just won't pick it up. Right. And if it does, it's not going to be accurate. Right. So that's why we use two different meters for that. Right. So we're checking when I'm measuring that's the very first thing that I do when I come into a home is I scan floor by floor for all RF wireless devices, because a lot of times you can even get things that are hidden in cabinets or closets, right? That are actually you can't visually see it, but the meters are sensitive enough that they're going to detect it, and then they're going to pick it up and tell you where it is. And a lot of times I can even pick up on the outside of homes where people's modems are actually where it is. So like if I'm walking down the side of a wall, I can say, yep, that's a modem right there. But I can't visually see it. All I can see is brick and concrete from the outside of the house, right? But these meters are so sensitive, and they are actually they have a sound signature as well that tells us the different types of things that we're picking up. So it could, for cordless telephones, it'll actually tell you a certain sound signature will tell you that's a cordless telephone. For modems, they have a different sound signature for that. So that's how these meters from Germany are actually built.
That sounds very sophisticated. What would
It
you
is
recommend for the average person? I mean, let's just say lots of people, you guys don't leave Ontario, right? Lots of people aren't going to be able to use your service. What if we want to just check our home quick?
Well, I think if you're there are several actually all-in-one meters that are really good. Me specifically, I actually just picked up one that's an all-in-one meter That's just something quick to use. Turn it on and it works really well. It's accurate. It goes up to 8 gigahertz. The biggest selling feature for me is that it allows you to data log. It's the only meter I've actually been able to find that allows you to data log and shows you the frequency of the signal that's coming through. That is the Cornet meter. But there are several other ones that are out there depending on what you're looking to do. The Trifield TF2 is also another one that is very highly rated.
That one's very, very popular.
It is, yeah, yeah, and that one there is more well known for its low frequency for magnetic and electric fields than it really is for its RF because it's made and manufactured in the US, but it only goes up to 6 gigahertz, right? So if you have, we're way past that right now in wireless technology. So in the US, a lot of people are more worried about 5G, right? So I know that there are actually a couple of meters out there right now. So I know Safe Living Technologies has one that goes from 20 to 40 gigahertz. It's a very specialized RF meter. It's a little bit more expensive than your average all-in-one EMF meter, but it's the only one that I know of in North America that actually allows you to measure 5G at the higher ranges.
Okay. So I have some questions. What do you think would be the difference in cost? Would it be smarter? Would it be better to build a home safe from EMF in the first place? What do you think the cost of that is? Like, say your house building cost was 100 grand, just the way we build them right now. How much more would it cost to build that home safe from EMF in the first place versus the cost of retrofitting? Like you mentioned earlier, some people, yeah, are tearing their walls down and stuff. And I'm that level. I'm ready to tear my entire house down and rebuild it or build it from scratch because I actually think that it wouldn't be worth it to retrofit it. At just my house is a piece of junk. I'd rather just rebuild it. So what would be the extra cost just in regular construction cost versus the cost of retrofitting basically the average house now?
Well, it's going to be much cheaper for you to do it from scratch, right? Because you're just kind of building in the EMF materials, right, on the walls. So obviously it's variable. It would be a variable expense. So the bigger the home, the more material you're using, the higher your cost, right? But what you don't have is the demolition costs of what it is when you're actually demoing um, a, a home to only to rebuild, right, and make it safer. So you're going to have much lower costs if you're building from scratch, right? Like a lot of people, they one of the biggest things is like the wiring in the walls, right? Because with the BX cable, the shielded cable, it shields against electric fields very, very well, right? So like if you put up your EMF meter to the wall where wiring is on the inside of that drywall, right? You're gonna see high levels of electric fields very easily, right? If those wires were actually shielded cable, then you would not be able to as easily pick up those electric fields because those electric fields are actually being shielded.
Okay. And so that it's just a different type of wire. It's just got a thicker
Yep,
coating
just
on it, metal
has a
fabric.
yeah, yeah. Instead of like if you take your average like 3-strand cable, right? It has a red, a black, and a neutral, right? That's encased in like a sheathing, right? It's the sheathing is just like a vinyl, right?
Mhm.
Um, the that's the difference is that sheathing versus the BX cable uses a hard metal outer shield, right? They use it a lot in garages and commercial type situations already. It's just that building biology really has kind of adapted that, and they use that in our wiring for when we're doing custom homes.
If you see a leaky outlet now, because I know that's a problem too, correct me if I'm wrong. The outlet's leaking. Like I've got one close to me behind me in my chair that I'm sitting in here now.
Mhm.
Do you sell or do anything about that? Can you block it? Can you just cut it off? Can you change the outlet face interface so that it doesn't leak?
Um, I guess the best thing to do there is really distance, right? I mean, if you distance yourself from that by more than 3 feet, it's not really an issue, right? I would say a bigger issue in the same kind of manner is with power bars, right? With power bars, we actually keep them by our feet all day long while we work, right? The electric fields that come off these power bars it's insane. It's super high, and that's a major issue when it comes to electric field storage in our body, right? That's a major contributor to higher body voltage. So what I usually recommend to clients in that case is for them to be able to take an extension cord to move that power bar 5 feet away from your desk instead, right? Rather than just having it sit right beside your feet all day.
Looking at mine right now, like I should move that further away from me.
It's a fantastic idea.
Good tip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. Looking at building houses from scratch, I'm thinking of building a house in the future. Maybe not tearing down my junk house, but buying a property and building a new house. I was thinking I had to basically run copper wires along the floors and stuff like that to make sure that the floors are grounded at each level. Because even this only came to my attention sort of recently. I didn't really think about it. The house that I live in up north in Canada, it's built on stilts basically because it's rocky. We don't level things up there. They just build different sizes of stilts and try and put it on a platform. So basically I'm always elevated from the ground, so I'm never grounded. But you were talking about this thing with the EMF paint before. Would I need to ground the floor if the rooms are all set up with that EMF paint grounding system?
So when it comes to the floors, let's say you have a 3-story house and the bedrooms are on the top floor. This was actually one of the situations that I ran into when I was doing my daughter's room, because we painted all four walls and the ceiling to shield against the RF coming from the outside of the house, right? But what we didn't do was shield the floors for any RF radiation that's coming from the main floor or the basement, right? So the proper way to shield in that case would be to take out the flooring, put down an RF material, or you can even paint plywood before you put the hardwood or even laminate over top, right? And what that does is that basically has the same effect as painting the outer walls, because keep in mind again that the whole point of the RF paint is to reflect the radiation back away from the home and reduce it as it penetrates through the walls of the home. So in that manner, rather than having those RF fields come up from the main floor or basement penetrating through the walls into the bedrooms, it's much better for you to be able to reflect it back away from the bedroom, right? Because if you are shielding all 4 walls and a ceiling from outer sources, but then not shielding the floor, you're just getting the radiation, if there is any, that's coming up through the first floor of the home.
But if you shield the whole thing, this is sort of, I have 2 related questions here. If you shield the whole thing, you're not grounded yourself though. Like I was talking about setting up the whole house so that it's grounded, and like you don't have to wear grounding shoes, or the whole floors would be a grounding mat in my ideal scenario here, which I don't know. I'd like your opinion on. And the second related question to that is, so you talked about how the RF paint and the contraption with the tape, and you concentrate it down to a grounding plate, so you're eliminating the static electricity in the room. That sounds good to me, because my real question was, if I plate off, like say I put tin walls, say I put tin plates behind every single wall, am I just trapping myself in with all of the frequencies? Because that's not eliminating them, right? It's shielding it from coming in outside, and it's shielding what's going on inside from getting outside. But is that worse for me being trapped inside a metal room, basically?
There is so I mean, like the EMF paint itself, it's really good at keeping signals out of the bedroom, right, from the outside. But if you have signals that are coming from within the bedroom, that's definitely an issue, right? Because it just pings off the walls, right? It amplifies those signals. And that's why people always ask that question. And I always say to them, well, if you're doing all of this to keep the RF radiation out of the bedroom, then it's probably in your best interest as well to not use RF radiation inside the bedroom after you've stopped it and shielded it from the outside of the house, because that's kind of like just defeating the purpose, right? You're inviting RF radiation into the room.
Well, what if this is an office?
If it's an office, it's the same type of thing, right? It's if it's an office, we look at, instead of using Wi-Fi, use corded Ethernet cables, right? So you're hardwiring it, because hardwiring cables doesn't have the radiation effect, right? But
Okay.
going back for just 1 second, talking about the floors and the grounding, right? It's actually Y-Shield, the paint manufacturing company. They have you can actually shield your floors as well from electric fields, right? There's not really a whole house grounding system that's available yet. It's kind of still room by room, right? But a lot of people, they do ground the floors, right? You can ground the floors. It's just they have different kinds of plates that attach to the floor. So what you would pretty much do at that point is, you would say you have plywood down, you would attach and screw down a ground plate that's attached with a copper cable that is the same type of way that on the drywall, right? It goes to a grounding source, and then it grounds those electric fields. So it's just, there's just different kinds of plates, but the Y-Shield manufactured all of that product.
Do you think that would be like one of the solutions here that we should implement
100%.
when we're building?
I think it's a great idea to do that. I think it's a great idea. And the paint is probably the most cost-effective way of doing it, but there are also other EMF materials that are groundable, that are conductive, that can be grounded, that do the exact same thing as the paint. It's just that the paint is much cheaper, right? EMF fabrics they're not cheap. They can get very expensive depending as well if you want it to be conductive or non-conductive.
Understood. So I saw your kit on Instagram. You had multiple meters and stuff in it. What could
Yeah.
you just rattle off what equipment you roll with?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use only state-of-the-art gigahertz solutions meters. These meters are all manufactured and calibrated in Germany. Germany is pretty much the pilot for a lot of the EMF stuff that comes out of there, right? So in my kit, we basically have, like I was saying earlier, the two different kinds of RF meters, which basically are broken down into the different frequencies. So like I was saying, we have one that goes up to 3.3 gigahertz. And then we have another one that goes up to 10 gigahertz, right? So those are our two RF meters. And then we also use the NFA 1000, which is the electric field and magnetic field meter. That's also the meter that we use for body voltage testing. That's standard in any building biologist toolbox, right? It's like a hammer and versus like screwdrivers, right? And then we also test for dirty electricity. So we have a meter where we call that we actually plug into the receptacle outlet, and it tells us the amount of dirty electricity that's present on the wiring inside the walls.
Can you talk about dirty electricity quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not in a
So,
hurry, by the way, but I respect your time here. But our audience, I know they really appreciate these deep dives. A lot of podcasts, they go for an hour and leave us wanting more.
yeah,
So
no, absolutely. No,
I'm
I got a
happy
bit
to
more time here.
get
So,
through all of this.
dirty electricity is actually becoming a big factor in electromagnetic fields, right? Because dirty electricity is really connected to body voltage testing, right? And body voltage and earthing and grounding, right? So basically, what is dirty electricity? So dirty electricity is it's frequencies that are in our home that are higher than the standard 60 hertz. Okay, so these frequencies, where do they come from? It stems from the utility, right? So before the power even comes into our homes, it's hot. There's clean power and there's dirty power mixed, right? So the clean power sits at 60 hertz, right? And you can think of 60 hertz almost like a sine wave. Okay, so it basically is a nice, clean, smooth wave, right? But we get frequencies that are higher than that and frequencies that are lower than 60 hertz. and that causes a lot of issues, right? So basically, frequencies that are higher than 60 hertz, you'll see a spike like this. It goes instead of that nice smooth wave, right? So like what we do is we use what we call oscilloscopes. So oscilloscopes basically will show you the frequencies on a screen. Oscilloscopes basically, it'll show you the different frequencies and how they're running. And it's actually very difficult and challenging to measure this. And not a lot of us are trained in how to do that. But it is something at building biology that we are trained in. And it's so when we use our meter, going back to our meters that we check for dirty electricity with, we're just basically plugging it into the receptacle outlet, right? And the dirty electricity that sits on the line, by that we mean it's the dirty electricity that's on the wiring in the walls, right? So you know how we were talking, going back to the electric fields that bleed off of these wiring that's in our walls, right? So what that meter is doing is it's measuring the frequencies that are higher than or lower than 60 hertz, right? And these can all be cleaned up. I'll give you an example. So for our dirty electricity meters, the readings that we are recommended levels are usually about 25 to 50 millivolts peak to peak. Okay, so that is basically saying that anything higher than 50, we need to bring it down lower, right? So these are actually usually pretty easy to clean up. There's a couple of what we call Stetzer filters, right? Or Greenwave has their version of it as well. And what these filters do is they filter out the frequencies that we don't want sitting on our wiring in the walls, right? So it cleans it up, right?
Is this something that plugs in?
You just plug it in, yeah, right into the outlet. Yeah, you plug it into the outlet, and it's all circuit based, right? So what I mean by that is by having one filter plugged, if you take a bedroom, right, usually all the receptacles are going to be wired to the same circuit, right? And by same circuit, I mean, like if you go down to your electrical panel and look at the diagram, it'll say upstairs master bedroom receptacles, right? So all the receptacles usually are dialogued or hooked up to one circuit, which is usually one breaker, right? So these filters that you're putting on the receptacle are going to impact each individual receptacle in the bedroom as long as it is attached to the same circuit, right? So if you have one that's coming in at 300 millivolts peak to peak, and that filter drops it to say 20, right, which is in the healthy range, then what typically happens from that point is that the other receptacles that are on that same circuit are now also automatically reduced by that amount.
Okay, that makes sense. Some houses have two breakers if they're bigger and stuff, but
and if that's the case, then we would need to put a filter on each circuit, and we test for all of that when we do the installation of these filters. So if at the end of our inspections, we do a full report on everything that we've done. We make our recommendations, and from there, what we do is basically the recommendations, if the client decides to go ahead with those recommendations for certain things, like even for the dirty electricity filters, we will install and remeasure to show the customer the reduction.
okay, that one sounds like an easy one because I've seen those devices.
It is an easy one. Yeah, it's an easy one, but it's something that is absolutely necessary. It's a major impacting part of EMF.
Will that save you money on your electric bill too?
No.
No?
No.
Some scammers are selling it like that.
No. So there's different ways to deal with it. There's also what we call cutoff switches, right? Which cutoff switches basically, they allow you to shut the electricity off for that part of the room, right? They're a little bit more expensive, right? Cutoff switches could be upwards of about $1,000, right? Versus a filter that runs at about anywhere. My filters, I charge about $90 for my filters, right? But these cutoff switches, what they do is basically they allow you to shut down whole room circuits, right? So like for your whole bedroom, which is that's I can't recommend anything better than that, right? Because it's just a matter of if it fits into your budget, and also a matter of if you can actually allow yourself to say, okay, I'm going to shut down the entire room from electricity
Hmm.
while I sleep at night, right? Because basically what those cutoff switches do is it's a switch that's installed in your bedroom, and it will allow you to just flip a switch, and that switch is actually connected to the breaker for that room downstairs in the electrical panel. And then when you wake up in the morning, or if you have to get up in the middle of the night, you just flip that switch and the electricity turns back on, right? But by turning off that switch, you are shutting down the entire circuit that's running through the room. When you do that, that also means that you're shutting down all the electricity that's running through the walls. When you do that, that means that any present electric field that could be conducted to your body is now shut down. And that's what we want. We want to have a zero electric field around our rooms so that our body voltage stays low.
So did you say you can just do this from the breaker as well? You can just turn off that part of the house?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've had clients that say, you know what, Mike, we'll just turn the breaker off all night,
Yeah.
right? Or every night. And that's going back to the same kind of thing as having the modem, just shutting down your modem at nighttime, right? If you can get past that inconvenience factor of having to remember to do this every single night, then that works.
But you're saying you can just install an easy switch in the room where you just
Yeah.
flip it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best way really to do it.
My house, I got to climb down the basement. It's not a real basement. It's again, it's like rocks, and
Oh yeah,
I got to
rock
climb under
foundation.
the stilts. So yeah, you kind of got to
Yeah.
crawl down on your hands and knees to get in the basement. It would be awkward, but I that's the kind of solution I would do first before doing any big moves. Just start turning things off at night.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Do you do anything about ions? And what do you do about air quality? Is that related?
So I don't really do too much with ions. Um, I do air quality, but for air quality, it's mostly measurement related, right? So I'll give you examples. Okay, so when I do air quality, we measure VOCs, formaldehyde, particulates, radon, right? Those are all forms of irritants. Okay, so they're lung, nose, and throat irritants. So you get people who have poor air quality, or some that are just sensitive to poor air quality,
Hmm.
right? And their noses are running, their throats are sore, they can't breathe. You start getting some people who have like really bad cases of asthma, right? So the what we do is we check for the levels that are running through the homes of these irritants. And air quality is so important because it's something that is you can't see it. You can't look in the air and see unless it's smoky like outside, right? But visually, like for a standard home, you really can't see it. So these meters, we really depend on them to detect these types of things, right? And so the meters that we do measurements on them, and then we look at the levels, and a lot of it comes down to basically clean homes, air ventilation, right? Using HEPA filters, right? Having there's a lot of portable air quality machines that you can use that filter the air in your bedroom, right, or in your living room. Dehumidifiers are very important as well, right? Because you want to make sure that the humidity levels that are in the bedroom, they're not too moist, it's not too dry, right? Those are all really important factors as well.
What type of meters and how do you measure air quality and mold?
So air quality, we usually go I go room by room, and I have one meter that kind of measures all three areas. It measures the VOCs, the formaldehyde, and the particulates all in one reading, right? And it gives us those levels. right? And then based on those levels, we look at the different kinds of things that could be impacting those levels, right? So for example, formaldehyde is a huge irritant, and there's certain things that are placed in our homes that are high in formaldehyde, right? So building materials, right? So you could walk into a home that has hardwood floors and hardwood furniture, and the formaldehyde would most likely be low, right? But you can walk into a home that has laminate floors, right? That has particle board, IKEA furniture. Maybe your tables and chairs are they're not made out of hardwood. Those are all things that are going to impact really high levels of formaldehyde, right? So how do we correct high levels of formaldehyde, right? So what we basically do is formaldehyde, when it's heated up. So formaldehyde over time basically off gases, and that's what causes the issues, right? So when furniture is off gassing this formaldehyde, our bodies, we breathe it in, it becomes an irritant, right? So what do we do to fix that? So what we do to fix that is we actually heat up the whole home, right? Or sorry, the whole room at once at a very high temperature, right? And what that does is it basically off gases that furniture all at once, sucks all the formaldehyde out of the product.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
That's
and
very cool.
then
Usually they say it takes like 2 to 5 years to off gas. That's what
exactly.
the new car smell is, right? New
Yeah,
carpet smell is the
yeah,
chemicals. So you can
yep,
just speed that
exactly.
up by superheating up the room.
Yeah, you heat up the room. It basically pulls out all the off gassing, and then you ventilate the room so that it all goes out the window. All right, so you have a machine that basically sucks up all the air in the room at that point and pulls it out to an exterior source.
Very, very, very cool.
Yeah, it is. It's very neat. And when it comes down to like the molds, the mold is a very tricky thing, right? So we have to be very thorough with mold. So what we do is we do visual inspections, right? Because sometimes you can see or even just probe the client for the right answers, right? That to help to get to the right answer. If I have a client that tells me, yeah, last year we had a leak in the roof and it came down and I had water damage on the inside of the home and it was repaired, right? Okay, that's great. Now, the mold, sometimes you'll be able to visually be able to see where the water damage is, and sometimes you won't be able to, right? Sometimes it's been repaired, but they didn't clean the insulation or replace the insulation on the inside of the wall where the cavities are, right? So inside it's still moist and damp. Maybe they didn't use a dehumidifier to dry everything inside the walls, right? So what we do is we use infrared cameras, right? That will show us moisture, right? So if we see moisture on a section of a wall where we suspect that there could be a leak or mold, right? Then we use the infrared camera, we see the moisture, and then what we'll do is we'll verify that moisture with a moisture meter, right? So moisture meters show us the areas of a wall where moisture is accumulating, right? Um, Even under sinks in bathrooms and kitchens, right? For example, you would be so shocked and surprised at how many people's piping actually leak underneath a sink, right? So the first thing we do is we run the water, we open the cupboards, we look underneath, and we look to verify for leaks. I had one customer's home recently where what we did was we verified a leak wasn't present at the time of inspection, but it was there, say, 6 months ago, right? And then when I'm inspecting underneath the room underneath, you see all the water damage in the wall, right? And then you think to yourself, okay, well, you add up it just adds up to show you really that the leak from upstairs is causing the damage in the floor down in the basement. So at that point, you run testing to see is there mold that's been airborne? Is it in the floors upstairs? If it is, like you can kind of see and repair it. It's a whole different kind of remediation with mold, right? But there's a lot of testing, and you got to look for the right questions to probe to get to the right answers.
Just a few questions left. What's the cost range? What's an idea of the cost? And we're in Canadian dollars here, by the way, for all the Americans listening, just so they can compare if they're looking at other services. What is someone looking at to have you guys or someone like you do this, come in and fully inspect the home?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Depending on the size of the home and the location, like a standard home in the Greater Toronto area that we do, say maybe 2 to 3,000 square feet, we'd be looking at about $500 to $550 for a full home inspection, right? That would cover you for EMFs, right? So with EMFs, that would be RF wireless radiation, the magnetic fields, the electric fields, the dirty electricity. And then that's the basic package. And then we also do the body voltage testing as well. The body voltage testing, we add on $100 for that. And that usually takes about an additional 45 minutes to complete on top of the regular inspection. But it is actually something that is very, very highly recommended to do. It really, for people that are very concerned about their health, body voltage is a very big thing.
You mean body as in the people who live in the home, right? And what, can you
Yeah,
explain this?
yeah,
What
oh
do you
yeah.
do?
So body voltage, what we do is we basically hook you up to, so you lie down in your bedroom on your bed, and we use the NFA 1000 meter, which is the standard building biology meter for magnetic electric fields, and we use a conductive handle that you hold on to, and we have you plugged into a ground outlet, a receptacle outlet that's grounded. We make sure it's grounded. And then what we do is we basically manipulate the electrical panel to see which breakers in the home or circuits are causing the body voltage testing or the body voltage to be the highest, right? So in other words, if you have 30 breakers on an electrical panel, right? That's different circuits that are running throughout the house. I always say the best way to think about this is like a tree outside. A tree has branches, right? That go all over, that go in different directions, right? So a electrical panel is the same type of thing. Each breaker is a different circuit that controls different areas of the home, right? So if you have a master bedroom and it's above, I've seen so many different things, but it's above a kitchen that has has receptacles. It's connected to a refrigerator. It's connected to an air conditioner, whatever, right? It basically, we want to find those circuits and identify them, which ones are contributing factors to making your body voltage the highest. And then what we do is we use that cutoff switch in the room that turns that breaker off at nighttime, right? And when you do that, it shuts that section of the house off, that instead of your body voltage being at 2500 millivolts, brings it down to 300, right? Ideally, we want to be below 100. So we work to get down as low as we possibly can. I've had clients that I've gotten them down to 23 millivolts or 18 millivolts, right? So we want to get them as low as we possibly can in that scenario.
So you're figuring out how you would accomplish that by measuring them, okay, when you're there, and then
Yep.
you're assuming that when you leave and everything's all set up that you've done, that they're going to remain at a lower body voltage.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's your environment that you're in at the time of doing the body voltage testing, right? So pretty much typically what we do is we have the client laying on the bed, holding the handle, they're plugged into the outlet, so their body is now grounded, right? So pretty much what it's doing is it's measuring the differential potential, right? And then when they have a cell phone and I'm downstairs at the panel with my phone, and basically every time I turn off a breaker, I ask the client, how is the meter reading changing, right? So if it's at 2500 on a baseline, which is the standard beginning before we shut anything off, each breaker that we turn off may reduce that number, right? So if we have one breaker that we turn off, nothing happens. Next breaker we turn off, nothing happens. And next breaker we turn off, it drops from 2500 to 1700. Okay, so we record that. And then we go through all the different breakers that are in the panel until we find the that drops it the most, right? Or maybe it's a combination of one or two breakers, right? That make that drop. And each individual kit for the cutoff switches are usually good for 1 to 2 breakers at least. So it gives us a bit of flexibility there to work with.
2 questions left.
Yeah.
Are we getting any help from the government? This looks like this is something that's 100% consumer driven. All of the concern about EMF comes from the private market, as far as I can tell. Does the government care at all? Is there anything in the form of regulations or anything? Because especially in Toronto, it's insane to me how low they're allowed to build these cell phone towers, how close they're allowed to build them to homes, and they're allowed to put them on top of churches and apartment buildings. And like it seems to be just a wild west of EMF with absolutely no control from the government. Is there any governmental concern about this? Is there anything about like living next to high voltage power lines? Is anything in the future that might actually reduce our proximity or reduce the ability of other companies to build these massive sources? And even things like subway lines and stuff too. I'm concerned I wouldn't live above a subway line. That's going to be my second question of if we could possibly mitigate these massive sources. But what's up with the government? Is there any government concern about this problem?
That's a great question, right? And I got to be very carefully how I answer that as well. So when it comes down to it, it really is the standards, right, of what is safe, right? And that number changes drastically. I'll give you the perfect example. So I actually had a client recently that was looking to buy a home, and they had it was right beside power lines. And they were very concerned before they spent $1.5 million on a home that they wanted to make sure it was going to be safe for their family, right? So I came in and I did my testing, and when we test for power lines, we do measurements at the base of the power lines, we do measurements in front of the home, we do measurements in each of the different rooms of the home, and all while we turn off the power inside the home, of course, because we want to only see what's coming from the outside, right? So in that case, I gave my recommendations, and we were anywhere between 2 and 4 milligauss, right? Which in a power field area, right, where there's power lines that are so close by, that's probably approximately what you would expect to get, right? Building biology standards say that we want to really be under 1. If I were to go to an average home, even my own home, and walk around with my magnetic field meter, I would probably get readings in most parts of the home about 0.3 of a milligauss, right? And we were getting anywhere between 2 and 4 milligauss in an area like that. So the client had actually called the local utility company, and the local utility company had told them, well, anything less than 10 milligauss, you're fine. And that just goes back to building biology standards, right? Versus what the government dictates is safe. And of course, the utility companies are going to basically go by what the government says is safe, right? They're not going to go by what building biology says is safe. So that's what it really comes down to. And funny question is, when I was actually in my doctor's office and I asked my doctor about electromagnetic fields, and I told him what I do. And I asked, actually, before I told him what I do, I asked him, I said, what do you think? Right? Just from a doctor perspective, off the books. And he said to me, not enough studies done. Right? And I just kind of laughed, and I was like, yeah, it's exactly what I thought he was going to say. Right? And really, when it comes down to it, I also work with another organization in Canada called Canadians for Safe Technology, right? And they are working on the back end with the counselors and government to basically get the recommended safe levels kind of more up to a standard in terms of today's technology, right? Because the last time it was actually updated, I believe, was in 2015. Well, think about how much technology has changed since 2015, right? So we're going back about 8 years. right? And we were probably 8 years ago, we were probably what, 3G, 4G. Like it's just changed so much since then, right? And so yeah, it's getting back to the standards of what is safe when compared to today's technology, because even now with like the whole thing in France with Apple and the iPhone 12s, right? And them finally coming forward and saying, yeah, you know what, there is something here. There's something about this phone that's not safe, and it's not meeting the new requirement standards of what is safe, right? And all while releasing the iPhone 15. So it was like, it was one of those things, and I actually really relate it to the whole thing about like within the 70s and 80s when tobacco and cigarettes, and how healthy or how dangerous is it to smoke, right? And they basically, all it took was one company to come forward and say, hey, you know what, this is not safe, it's dangerous, and it causes cancer. And now what do we see on all cigarette packages in every tobacco company? They have the warnings, this is not safe, right? And that was a major step in telling people, you know, because if you think about it, and it, back in the 60s and 70s versus today, what is the one thing that people always had in their pockets, in their purses? Pack of cigarettes, right? Nowadays, what do people have in their pockets and in their purses?
A microwave.
Exactly, and in their bras, right? A cell phone, right? So it's really what that's what it comes down to is one company coming forward and saying this is not safe.
Well, in the settings in these phones, most of them, they tell you not to put it to your head. They tell you to keep
Yeah,
distance.
they do. Yeah, but who reads that, right?
Well, yeah, no, they're protecting their butts for the future lawsuit season that's going to be
Mhm.
coming around.
Yeah.
Do you use any protective devices on your phone? I said I had one question left. That's not it. I snuck in another question there.
Yeah, that's okay. It's I don't. I mean, I really, really, really struggle to kind of understand how those devices work, right? And to be honest, that kind of stems from my whole background in like building biology, because we are trained on removing the source, right? That's the best way to kind of get rid of the source, right? So the best way to get rid of cell phone radiation is to get rid of the cell phone itself, right? Well, I mean, I kind of understand 100% how these things work and don't work. And I think when it comes down to it, really, like, I think that there are cell phone cases out there that use shielding materials, and I make those as well, right? I have those as well that I use. I have cell phone pouches with zippers that are actually insulated with RF foil, the same RF foil I use for the modem covers, right? And yeah, they work. They work, but these little things that people are putting on the back of their phones, right? I don't know the technology, the engineering behind it, so I will never say it doesn't work, right? I will never say that, because I don't I'm not associate I'm not familiar with how their product works, right? That would be the same thing as someone coming forward and saying my modem cover doesn't work. It's up to the manufacturer to prove to the client how their product works. I will never step in and say that doesn't work, because that's not my product, and that's not my business to say that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. Quite honestly, I don't really understand them either. I've got like 4 different devices on my phone, and there's
Yeah.
only one that I can find works from muscle tests, which is not
Yeah.
a meter-based thing, you know.
Exactly.
I think this building biology thing sounds like a really good course, by the way. There's a lot of young people who follow me who don't know what to do in their life. I mean, this sounds like a very viable career in today's world, cleaning up the mess of the technological industry. We've got this world that's basically run by tech nerds right now, from the social media companies and the telecom cartels and the governments. You know, they're all just enamored with this technology. Let's just make everything smart. This is amazing. We can surveil everything. We can turn off everything at will. You know, we can freeze your bank accounts if you go protest against the truckers and whatever. We don't mean to get too political here, but I'm just saying that it seems like everyone above us is just loving all this technology. And it's those of us, the peasants at the bottom, that are like, hey, wait a minute. I don't feel so good when I sleep next to this thing. Hey, I don't feel so good when I have this in my. Hey, why are so many women getting lumps and tumors in the breast that they keep their phone? You know, or this is not like there's an overabundance of tumors that happen. Cancer is still not your number one fear out there, but there seems to be a lot of correlation between tumors showing up where the phone is used most. And we're the ones with these concerns. I mentioned that earlier. This is a consumer concern thing. Government doesn't seem to be concerned about it at all. And you gave a very kind of tiptoe answer around it, because I think you can say that, yeah, there's not much going on from the government. You mentioned a couple of private organizations that are trying to get the government to increase their standards, or at least reevaluate their standards. It's not on their end. The government's not coming and saying, hey, whoa, telecom, let's slow this down a little bit. Hey, whoa, high voltage power lines, maybe we don't allow them to be built next to schools and all this stuff.
It's funny because I think you ask yourself, what was there first, the power lines or the schools? Probably the power lines, right? So I think when it comes down to it, it's also a big factor for urban planning, right? How we're setting up our cities, right? Should we really be building beside these power lines, right? I did an inspection, and it was and power lines where the client wanted to buy the home, and when we went to the back of the home, they had this big, huge open field where all the power lines were in a series, running one by one by one for miles. And the homeowner actually came to me and the buyer and said, "Oh yeah, this is awesome. We have this big open field. We throw parties back here. Our kids play here all day long." And when I was taking meter readings, I was getting like 20 milligauss. And I was like, oh, sounds fantastic. But yeah, what was there first, right? The power lines or the house? Probably the power lines.
Probably the power lines. And this is actually my last question, and it's sort of just a broad question. Is it possible to design cities safely? And just before you answer, let me just say, most of my audience knows I'm on the extreme end. I live at the edge of civilization. I don't know if you've ever been up to Kirkland Lake. Doesn't go much farther north. You know, a lot of people that I grew up with in Toronto, they won't even come visit. It's too far. It's too scary to go all the way up there. Mm-hmm. And there is very little up there. That is my solution, is to leave society. And I know that that's not a real solution. That's why I talk with people like you, because there has to be better ways for us to design this world. It can't be the answer that those of us who value our health have to leave society. That's such a terrible answer. I realize that. But from all angles in the city, I find it less healthy. You're dependent on the food system. You're dependent on municipal water. You're not necessarily in control of the air quality. EMF is everywhere. What are your ideas on what, now knowing what you know about safe homes and helping homes get safer? What do we do on a societal level? Can we make societies safe? Do we need to tear them down and redesign it? Do these high voltage lines, do they need to go underground? Spitball me some ideas about this.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, I don't think any of that's ever going to change until the government kind of stabilizes what is safe, right? Because as far as they're concerned, as far as the big telecommunication companies are concerned, we don't need to change anything, right? It's none of that is going to change until we change how we think about it. And that's why, like, the Canadian government website called Safety Code 6 basically dictates everything on what is safe, right? And that, I think, just needs to be updated. I think that's what they need to do. They need to look at what is actually really safe. And I mean, for me, I basically go by building biology standards. That's my training. It's no different than like really what a doctor goes through at medical school on, like what hemoglobin levels are safe, or what our white blood cell counts are safe, that kind of thing, right? Like that's our training, right? Is we're trained on what is safe, and there's different levels, right? There's no concern, there's slight concern, there's extreme, right? And So that's what we go by. And I'll tell you one thing, it doesn't take much to go from slight concern to extreme. But what we do is we try to identify the sources that are causing the problem, which is really not a hard thing to do. And then we really look at what is the best way to effectively tackle those levels that are coming through. And a lot of the time it's just through sort by elimination, right? And if you can get rid of all of the wireless devices in our homes, and nobody's going to get rid of Wi-Fi. It's almost impossible in this day and age. But if you can cover it with a box that blocks the radiation, right? Or with the smart meter, right? That you can shield it so that it gets reflected away from your home instead of allowing it to penetrate through, then source by source, you're gonna reduce your overall amount of EMF that is actually coming through. And that's what we basically do is, first of all, we scan floor by floor, room by room, any identifiable source that's causing a problem, and we record that. And then we also do what we call total exposure measurements, right? Which basically it's just a different kind of antenna that allows you to measure a room 360 degrees versus directional. So we use directional antennas to basically show us where the radiation is coming from, the direction, identifying sources, right? And then we basically do total exposure measurements, which will tell you the amount of radiation 360 degrees that's entering the room. And that's pretty much, we never really talked about this yet, but I always think of it almost like a math equation. Okay. So like when we're talking about wireless radiation, it's everything that's outside of the house that's penetrating through the wall. So that's A, plus B, which is all radiation coming from sources inside the home, equals C, which is your total exposure measurement, right? So it's inside plus outside, right? Because if you think about it on our homes, the wall are basically, maybe they have paint on them, EMF paint, or maybe they have concrete or metal that is blocking out some of the radiation, but some of it is still getting through, right? If our windows are not covered with an EMF film or an EMF curtain, then it's just blown right through the windows, right? So you can shield those walls all day long. If you don't shield the windows, it's just going to come in the windows. And if you don't shield the floors and you have stuff underneath the room, it's just going to come up through the floors. So that's why we really we're very thorough in how we do these things, and we really go floor by floor, room by room, to find all the sources. Because if you find the sources and you eliminate the sources, then it just makes it easier as you go through your shielding strategy.
Oh, I know we could have covered more too. You just brought in some big ones there, curtains and stuff.
Yeah, well, we could set up a part 2.
Yeah, this has been really, really great. I thank you so much. I'm gonna have all of your information in the description of this podcast, audio, whoever's listening, audio, and video, whoever's watching video. And I'm gonna do an intro, outro here after this. But tell us more. How can people get in contact with you? And I did kind of ask, but I didn't really ask. Do you only service Ontario?
Yeah, right now we're only servicing Ontario right now. Yeah, but I mean, in the future we are looking to expand. Absolutely.
Even into the neighboring states and provinces that we have.
Absolutely.
Everyone needs this. Everyone needs this.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you know what? I mean, we're always willing to do everything we can to help those that are in need. So, yeah.
Cool. Hopefully there's some other businesses too that maybe even want to partner up. Sounds like there's some expertise here that can definitely expand into other territories for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's the best way for people to set up consultations and stuff with you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to our website at safeguard-solutions.ca, there's a contact message page there. You can just you can fill that out. It comes directly to our email, or you can also email me at Mike, MIKE, at safeguard, SAFEGUARD -solutions. It's safeguard-solutions.ca.
Very cool. And I want to get a couple things for you. I go back to Ontario late next month. I would love that Wi-Fi cover and
Yeah,
the
absolutely. So we actually ship them as well. We ship to the US and we ship all across Canada with UPS, Purelator, whoever, right? I have accounts set up, so we take care of that. Really, all we need for that is we would need the dimensions because everything is customized, right? It's a custom order. So
okay.
we custom order according to size of your modem and also the color. So we wrap these modems in fabric, which is a cotton fabric. For breathability, it's better. And I'll never forget the very first modem cover I sold. It was actually to a lady, and we brought it there. And what was happening there was her dog was actually very, very sensitive to the Wi-Fi, and they just switched the modem. And the I got there, and the dog was just quivering. And she said, "That's great. The modem cover works awesome." I showed her exactly how it worked, but she said it's a bit of an eyesore because an RF foil is bare, right? It's silver, it's metal, it's shiny, right? So that's when I came up with the idea to actually wrap it in a cotton fabric. And so clients will call me, to say, "Mike, these are my dimensions. I want gray." Or, "Mike, these are my dimensions. I want brown." Right. And so we customize the color as well as the size. And these are not just for modem covers. I do a lot of custom fitting for wireless speakers or other devices, Google Home devices, right? Where people want to shield that. Then that's why I was saying we basically we customize for all different kinds of scenarios.
You have any other products that you didn't mention? Like you got the dirty electricity filter, you've
Yeah,
got
actually, one
covers.
that I'm just about ready to launch. I just sent it through to our professional photographer for pictures. Another big problem outside of the modem covers for RF radiation is for baby monitors, right? So baby monitors give off a ton of radiation, and all these videos are on our Instagram page. So what we did was we basically came up with a cover for the baby monitor. And the only thing that's really different from it being from the modem is that you need a window, right, for the actual baby monitor to see out into the room. So what we did was we actually used a window film, a double layer of window film to make that window. And so it is very effective because we use the same RF foil that we use for the modem covers, and it's very, very effective at shielding the baby modem. But yeah, that's another product that we just launched.
Yeah, it's very important. We're gonna have to do a part two at some point because there's a bunch
Yeah,
of questions that I still have about more nitpicky things about different types of devices in our lives. But yeah, I think we should
yeah,
realize anything wireless. It's kind of one of the big messages here. Anything wireless is going to be a problem. These are all things that we invite into our home. And so getting rid of them is the best thing here. And
yeah,
yeah, do you have any closing advice for the people?
yeah, absolutely. Just be open to education on this subject, because I would say at least half of the people that I talk to, their response and reaction to it is, "Oh, come on, we've been living like this for years and years and years." And the answer to that is, "Yeah, but how well have we been living with this for years and years and years?" And that's why really I think it doesn't take much to tweak the way that we live and to make things better and to make things healthier, right? And we just have to be open to the conversation. And a lot of times after how this works and show people, that's why I do so many demonstration videos on social media and stuff, because unless people actually see how this stuff works and the dangers that it actually brings upon us, right? If you think about it, we have meters in our home. We have for smoke and carbon monoxide, right? Smoke and carbon monoxide are two things that could be deadly. EMFs are, you can't see them, and we don't have meters set up for that, right? So if we can have, but it's just EMFs are at high levels are just as dangerous, right? Maybe not deadly right away, but they impact us on levels that really debilitate us. And a lot of times, when I was doing my training in building biology, we did it all down in North Carolina. So a lot of the people that were there attending, they didn't own businesses. They weren't inspectors, right? They were just your average person that were looking to find ways to be able to cope in society and to be able to live with how our environments are changing. And these were people that they couldn't walk into a room full of technology. They can't. They could, as soon as they walk into a room, it's like when you walk into a room and you smell a pizza. These individuals could walk into a room and they could tell right away. There's Wi-Fi in here, right? The electric fields are too high. There's mold. These people, they're very sensitive, so their intuition to it is much higher than the standard average person's. And they say there's a term for people that are sensitive from EMFs, and it's actually titled electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS. And they say that 97% of people cannot feel it and do not recognize it when they walk in a room. But there's 3% who suffer from EHS, and those are the people that can tell right away something's off.
So be aware, be open to learning about it. This problem's not going away. It is everywhere. We got to do something about it. There's several solutions. On the video version of this, which will probably only be on Patreon, by the way, for the audio listeners, you can always go on the Patreon for $2 and see all the extra content there. I am probably going to put in a bunch of your videos on that video version as well, because yeah, they are very enlightening to just straight up see this is what our common devices are doing, and there are some simple ways to cover that up. So, Mike, I thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time more than I can say, and I do hope we do a part 2 one day. I'm going to put all your information in the descriptions wherever this is posted, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you again.
Absolutely. You as well. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to get the word out.
Of course. And I hope that more people take up your service, because we absolutely need this. I don't know of any others in Ontario, at least, that are this thorough. I've seen some other ones, and the reason I didn't even want to really talk to them is because they didn't seem like they were going the full extra mile in what they're doing. No, and you were actually recommended to me by some of your clients. So,
oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, you do good work. I'm sure you do. So once again, thank you. Thank everybody else.
Appreciate that.
Take care.
Take care. Have a great evening.
You too.
So the modem is one of the highest radiating sources in your home. And so I've come up with a modem cover that will help to protect your family from the harmful effects of the radiation. So as you can see here, the modem is at 1.8 million microwatts per meter square. So in the bedrooms, we want to be around 100. Okay. So let's see here with the modem cover exactly how much that changes. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be testing for direct electricity. So I'll show you the different things that we do. When testing, first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the outlets are grounded. Okay, so that's what I use this little guy here for. And we plug it in, we should get a green light that shows us that everything is grounded, which we just got here. Awesome. Okay, so that's step one. The second thing we do is we're testing for dirty electricity. So our stoves, refrigerators, they all run at 60 hertz, right? But we get this dirty power that enters our homes and sits on the wiring. This also affects our body voltage as well. So that's what we're testing for right now.
Okay.
So right here, we're getting about 270 millivolts peak to peak. So it is a little bit elevated. We want to try to be around 25 millivolts peak to peak. So what we're doing here now is we have a filter that we can plug in to the outlet, and what it will do is it will reduce the dirty electricity. So I'll show you how that works. So you can see here now it's dropped down to 15. And that's what the filters do. They just help to filter out the frequencies that are higher than 60 hertz. Okay, if I remove the filter, you can see it goes back up.
Okay, so this is electric fields.
So we're just scanning for electric fields right now.
In that case, you're looking at a different number, right? On the
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you want to technically be around 5 volts. These are the types of things, I mean, they're far enough away from the bed that they really shouldn't be too much of an issue. But you can see here, if you were to have the power bar close by, right, you're going to pick up higher levels of electric fields in there, right? Typically speaking, though, you can see here, we're at 3.3 volts on the bed, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want.
Okay.
If you had lamps plugged in closer to the bed, you would see much higher levels of electric fields, and that's what we want to try and avoid. And Sylvie does not have any of those things,
No,
so we are
Don't
great.
plug anything in near our bed situations.
Absolutely.
Today I just wanted to show you the difference between a grounded room and an ungrounded room. This room here has recently been painted and has been grounded, so electric fields are much lower in this room. Now let's take a look at the electric fields in the master bedroom, which is not grounded. Instantly you already see the reading starting to rise. Now let's try turning on the light. It's a difference of about 10 to 12 volts. Let's go back to the room that's grounded again. Back down to 1.5 volts. This is the reason that we recommend grounding the rooms. Safe levels are between 1 and 5 volts as per building biology standards. And again, this is linked to body voltage and health and wellness while we sleep. Cell phones in the bedroom when they're charging. I wanted to show you why these are so terrible for our health. Take a look at this. So what I did was I plugged this in, and using my NFA 1000, I did some bed mapping to show me where the electric fields are around the bed. If you take a look here, this is the top of the bed. Okay, so this is where we had a lamp plugged in, and I just wanted to kind of show you guys exactly where electric fields would be higher. But take a look at where the cell phone was plugged in around this purple area. So this is a chart, the green, yellow, kind of reddish, and then purple is the worst. Look at this whole section here with the purple. This is what happens when our bodies or when we charge our cell phones around the bed. So for best practices in a much healthier environment, take those cell phones to the bathrooms, or take those cell phones, leave them downstairs in the kitchen. Because again, what happens is our body is a natural conductor and will grab onto these electric fields and store them in our body. And that's when all of the issues start. So best practices, as you can see, you want to be more in the green than you are in the purple. If you need measurements at your home, give us a call.